Ali, you wanted to also talk a little bit about the ceasefire crisis, and there's been a lot of speculation or unconfirmed information, very unclear what has happened in the last 24 hours. As both John and I mentioned, Abu Ubaidah said right after the Netzarim corridor was finally evacuated by the Israeli occupation forces. Abu Ubaidah, the spokesperson for the Qassam brigades, said Israel has not made good on its obligations under the ceasefire terms. Hamas listed hundreds of violations of the ceasefire. And they said, the next prisoner swap will be postponed indefinitely until Israel agrees to the terms that it had already agreed to. And now, in the last 24 hours, it looks like Israel may have been feeling some sort of pressure. It's unclear if it's from the Palestinian resistance enforcement of those terms or other factors. What do we know, and what can we say about where it is now?
Can I
Yeah,
read Abu Ubaidah's statement in full? I have it here. It might
Sure.
be
Yeah, that's a good
clarifying.
idea.
So on Monday, he released a statement saying, during the past 3 weeks, the resistance leadership has monitored the enemy's violations and failure to abide by the terms of the agreement, from delaying the return of the displaced to the northern Gaza Strip, targeting them with shelling and gunfire in various areas of the Strip, and not allowing the entry of relief supplies in all the forms according to what was agreed upon, while the resistance has implemented all of its obligations. Accordingly, the handover of the Zionist captives who are scheduled to be released next Saturday, corresponding to 15 February 2025, will be postponed until further notice and until the occupation commits to and compensates for the entitlements of the past weeks retroactively. We affirm our commitment to the terms of the agreement as long as the occupation commits to them. And then the Islamic resistance movement, the political branch, came out with a statement shortly after that said, we confirm our commitment to the terms of the agreement as long as the occupation adheres to them. And this is the key part. We deliberately announced the postponement of the handover of the Israeli prisoners 5 full days before the date of the handover of the prisoners in order to give the mediators sufficient opportunity to pressure the occupation to implement its obligations. And the door is kept open to the implementing of the exchange on time if the occupation adheres to it. So that the 5 days was the key part of that, to say you have this amount of time before. I think that's an important thing to note.
that's great. And it's very helpful to hear that statement, John, because it really sets the stage. And that echoes also what Abu Ubaidah said in his video the day that the ceasefire went into effect, that Hamas is committed to the ceasefire and to the terms of the agreement as long as Israel is committed to them. In other words, they made clear from the very beginning that this is not going to be a one-sided agreement where Israel gets what it wants and Palestinians don't get anything. And I think we've all understood, and I'm thinking now of the scenes we saw when we were talking to Abu Bakr, or our conversation last week with Asim and Nabi, who is an engineer and a spokesperson of the Gaza municipality, that the greatest danger now for people in Gaza is to go back to the pre-October 7 pattern of death by siege and Israel keeping a chokehold on Gaza, which it still has, because a lot of the goods have to move in either through the Kerem Shalom crossing, which is between Gaza and Israel, or the Rafah crossing and the so-called Philadelphia route, which the Israelis have still not withdrawn from. So that's the danger. And I think that the calculation from Hamas was, we have to take a stand now, because if we compromise on this now. And remember, they didn't compromise on it during 15 months, of genocidal bombing. Why would they compromise on it now during a ceasefire? So they called Israel's bluff. And what we saw during the week was these threats from Trump saying if all the hostages aren't released by noon on Saturday, then I can't remember the exact phrases he used, that all hell will break loose, and I think Israel's just going to go in and do whatever. They were raising the stakes so high, and then Netanyahu came out. Was it Tuesday or yesterday, and echoed Trump's statement, but left out, he didn't say all the hostages. He didn't say all the captives. He said, if they don't release our captives by noon. So giving the impression that Israel is going to go wild on Saturday or was tearing up the deal. And this was all being, cheer-led in mainstream media by just this echo chamber saying that of course Hamas is violating the deal. Hamas is violating the deal without paying any attention to Israel's violations. And I think one of the most egregious examples of that, Tamara, I'd like to show the tweet from UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. Did I give you that? I may not have
there
given
it is.
Oh, okay, thank you. I'm looking at my notes. And so this was on February 11th, so this was on Tuesday, and he says, we must avoid at all costs resumption of hostilities in Gaza that would lead to immense tragedy. I appeal to Hamas to proceed with the planned liberation of hostages. Both sides must fully abide by their commitments in the ceasefire agreement and resume serious negotiations. So what do you get from this, from Antonio Guterres? You get the impression that Hamas is the side that is reneging on the deal, and Hamas is the one that needs to behave. And then you get this statement about both sides, which is very generic. There's nothing in there saying, I call on Israel to abide by the humanitarian annexes. So Guterres here, as many other commentators and media, are feeding the Israeli propaganda or the propaganda from the Israeli government and from Trump that Hamas is blowing up the deal. But what was actually happening, the truth we could get from a couple of sources. First of all, we have this article, and this was also on Tuesday, in Ma'ariv, the Israeli newspaper. This is one of the Israeli newspapers. And I'll just read a translation of that. They say, the defense establishment and the IDF, the Israeli army, say that so far the terrorist organization, meaning Hamas, of course, has not violated the agreement, and therefore it is very doubtful whether Israel can take steps against Hamas at this stage. It is also estimated that Israel will first act with the mediators on the issue. So this tells us, first of all, the army is saying that the genocidal Israeli army is coming to the defense of Hamas and saying they haven't violated the agreement. We're on the ground. We don't see any violations. And there's a couple of reasons that they might be saying that. One, it's true. The other is that the army doesn't want to go back to war. And that's what they're signaling here. They're saying, we're not going back, at least not now. And then we have this buried deep in, and that was on February 11th, the Ma'ariv article. And then we have this one also on February 11th from the New York Times, an article headlined, Trump to meet Jordan's king as Gaza truce hangs in the balance. And buried deep down in the article, I mean, we're talking paragraphs deep, they say, the current standoff stems partly from Hamas's accusation that Israel has not upheld its promises for the first phase of the ceasefire. Israel was required to send hundreds of thousands of tents into Gaza, a promise that Hamas says Israel has not kept. Speaking on the condition of anonymity to discuss a sensitive matter, 3 Israeli officials and 2 mediators said that Hamas's claims were accurate. I mean, That should be the headline of the story,
That's
but
burying the lead.
Never.
it's
Yeah, a little
buried
bit.
way down. But not one Israeli official, 3 Israeli officials
Mhm.
and 2 mediators said that Hamas's claims were accurate. So it's so shameful that
Yeah.
the UN and so many others were so quick to blame the Palestinian side and effectively act. Antonio Guterres effectively acting as Israel's attorney.
Yeah.
So
It's reflexive.
Let me
yeah,
read you the details of what's actually missing, because it's agreed to line by line and signed and guaranteed by the parties that are backing this. Of the 200,000 tents that were supposed to enter the Gaza Strip, 200,000, only 53,000 have entered. So there's 150,000 tents short in the middle of the storms that you so rightly pointed out are devastating. People's tents are destroyed. People moved from the south back to the north and left their tents that were destroyed in the south. The tents were supposed to be on day 1. They were supposed to come in. We're now day 26. None of the caravans, the 60,000 𝐓𝐡𝐞 trailers that people would live in, none of those 60,000 have been delivered. It was supposed to be 50 fuel trucks a day, which is critical to getting the infrastructure in Gaza up. It's getting the water desalination plants. It's getting
Sewage pumps. Yeah.
sewage pumps, the water pumps, all of on and on and on.
the
Everything that
heavy
needs
equipment, the
Yes.
earth-moving
fluid.
equipment.
Yeah. So there's 50 trucks
Hospitals.
supposed to come each day. Only 15 have entered daily. So 35 trucks of fuel each day, now day 26. That's piling up. 12,000 aid trucks should have entered the Gaza Strip by now. Only 8,500 have. That's a 3,500 truck shortage. 3,500 trucks. When we're talking about, you know, the starvation levels that were inside of Gaza, this is a significant amount. And then the heavy equipment, this is the key. This is really the key. Only 4 pieces of heavy equipment have been allowed in. They're all, as Nora reported, stacked up on the Egyptian border, ready to come through Rafah at any point, or go around and go through Kerem Shalom if that's what Israel wants. So only 4 of 500 that were agreed to in the deal, signed by all the guarantors of the parties. Israel has not allowed the entry of building materials for reconstructions of the hospitals or civil defense. That was also supposed to come in on day 1. And the power plant has not yet been activated, and no equipment has been brought in to repair it and the electricity grid in Gaza. Those were both day 1 things as well. So these aren't things that were supposed to come day 21 and haven't by 26. This is 3 weeks, almost 4 weeks of this not happening. And that is a significant portion. It's not just dribs and drabs. That is a significant portion of each element of the deal that are being reneged upon.
And so which is all critical to actually moving Gaza. What we've heard in the past few days repeatedly from Trump and from Netanyahu is that they want to keep Gaza as unlivable as possible or make it even more unlivable. And so they have withholding this aid and equipment is essential to their plan for ethnic cleansing, for forced displacement. So the stakes could not have been higher for the resistance. And they took a stand, knowing that they could risk Israel restarting the war. That is a risk. Even if we say, well, the Israeli army is exhausted and, the politically within Israel, the population doesn't want to go back to this war. You can list all those factors, but you can't rule out that Israel will still do it anyway. And Hamas took that risk. And it seems, it's still 2 days away from Saturday. And, each day is like a month in this period of history. But the indications are positive. And so we had some reporting from Reuters today that I think we can put up. We've had a couple of, these are just some of the news briefs that came out today from Haaretz and from Reuters. And one of them says that According to Palestinian sources who spoke with Haaretz, Israel and Hamas have reached an agreement over the next phase of the deal to take place this Saturday, in which 3 hostages will be released in accordance with the deal. Israel will increase the entry of aid into the strip, mainly consisting of tents, gas, and medical equipment. According to the sources, the entry of caravans, that's mobile homes, into Gaza depends on their production process in Egypt. And then from Reuters, mediators are exerting pressure for the deal to be fully implemented, ensure Israel abides by a humanitarian protocol, and resume exchanges of Israeli hostages held in Gaza with Palestinian prisoners. So it looks like it's heading in that direction. I think that if this is what happens, and I think everyone hopes this is what will happen, then that will have been an important test to show that the resistance is not going to back down in ceasefire times. I don't want to say peacetime. They're not going to back down in ceasefire times, just as they didn't back down during the battle. And in a sense, the future of Gaza depends on them being able to enforce this agreement to the letter.
Yeah. So assuming that the ceasefire holds and there is a prisoner exchange on Saturday, John, what do we know about the Israelis who are supposed to be exchanged, and what do we know about the Palestinian political prisoners who are supposed to be released?
They, as far as I know, unless it just happened, 𝐤𝐿 hasn't said the names. Normally, they would have said the names by now that are the next 3, and then each of these phases are 75 prisoners from the West Bank, security prisoners that have life or long sentences, and 111. That's the number that they've come up with for the last 3 exchanges with people from Gaza to return to Gaza. And some of the people are being exiled, the life sentences. Some of them are exiled to Gaza. Some of them are exiled outside to neighboring countries. And that should be for the next 3 weeks. I believe that there is only 8 or 9 remaining alive captives. So I think that's part of the reason
Israeli
why,
captives.
yeah, Israeli captives. That's part of the reason why 𝐤𝐿 is making this stand at this point, because they're running out of runway for this, and they're not. And they have been patient to wait it out till day 24 to even announce that they're doing this. But I think, not to speculate, and I think a lot of this, our audience will be watching this show after that. After we'll know if the prisoners were released. But the messaging that 𝐤𝐿 delivered is the purpose. Holding back the prisoners at this point, I don't expect that to be. I expect movement, and seeing enough movement. 𝐤𝐿 doesn't want to violate the ceasefire, so they're honorable in following the ceasefire, and that has been the case for ceasefires dating back to 2003. But we'll see. It's 36 hours from now, we'll know. And then in the time being,
We'll be following it very closely, as we have been the last 3 weeks of the ceasefire process.